My daughter-in-law tried to kill me on Thanksgiving. I watched her do it from my phone while I was pretending to use the bathroom. The little bottle she pulled from her purse was labeled organic sleep aid, but I knew better. I'd been watching her for 3 months, and this was the moment I'd been waiting for. When I came back to the table and took that first bite of poisoned sweet potato casserole, the look of anticipation on her face was almost worth dying for. Almost. But I wasn't going to die. I was going to do something so much better. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button, because this story is going to take you places you never expected. Let me tell you how a Thanksgiving dinner turned into the most satisfying moment of my 58-year-old life. My name is Carol Henderson, and 6 months ago I was just another grandmother who baked too many cookies and got ignored at family gatherings. My son Marcus married Christina 4 years ago, and from day one, that woman looked at me like I was a cockroach in her designer kitchen. Christina came from money, the kind of family where they summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen, whatever that means. My late husband Tom and I built a comfortable life, nothing fancy, but we owned our home outright, and I had a nice nest egg from his life insurance and our investments. Apparently, that wasn't enough for Christina. She wanted me gone, and she'd been working on Marcus for years to make that happen. The comments started small. Carol, wouldn't you be happier in a retirement community? You know, somewhere with people your own age. Carol, this house is so big for one person. Have you thought about downsizing? Carol, memory issues are so common at your age. Are you sure you're managing okay on your own? I'm 58 years old. I run a successful online consulting business. I have a master's degree in finance, and my memory is sharp enough to recall every single passive-aggressive comment she's ever made. But Christina had convinced Marcus that his poor old mother was declining, losing her grip, becoming a burden. My son, the boy I raised alone after Tom died when he was 12, actually started looking at assisted living facilities without telling me. I found out because he left the brochures in my kitchen after one of their visits. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. So I did what any rational person would do. I installed cameras, 12 of them, hidden throughout my house, all linked to my phone with crystal clear video and audio. I told myself I was being paranoid, that surely my own daughter-in-law wouldn't actually try to harm me. But I've learned that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. Christina had been showing me for 4 years that she wanted me out of the picture. The cameras caught everything. The first time was in August. I'd invited them over for Sunday dinner, something we used to do every week before Christina started making excuses. Marcus was out in the garage helping me look for some old photo albums when Christina went to the kitchen to help with the salad. I watched on my phone as she pulled a small brown bottle from her purse and added several drops to my water glass. My blood ran cold. I came back to the kitchen acting normal, but I switched our glasses when she wasn't looking. Christina drank that water herself, and within an hour, she was complaining of severe stomach cramps. She blamed my cooking, naturally, said I must have used spoiled lettuce. Marcus took her home early, apologizing for my carelessness. I saved that video file and labeled it Evidence 1. The second time was in September. Christina brought over homemade cookies, a peace offering, she said, because she felt bad about getting sick last time. I thanked her profusely, took the cookies, and watched her leave. Then I fed one to my neighbor's dog, an ancient golden retriever named Buddy, who could eat anything. Buddy got violently ill and had to go to the vet. The vet found traces of antifreeze in his system. I paid the $300 vet bill, saved the cookie bag as evidence, and started documenting everything. The third time was October. Christina offered to make my coffee when they stopped by on a Sunday morning. I watched her on camera add something from a little bottle to my cup. This time I was ready. I'd bought a home drug testing kit, the kind they use in hospitals. While she and Marcus were in the living room, I tested that coffee. It came up positive for a massive dose of diphenhydramine, the stuff in sleeping pills, enough to potentially cause respiratory depression in someone my size, especially if I was alone and couldn't call for help. I poured the coffee down the sink, saved the sample, and added it to my growing evidence file. I should have gone to the police then. I know that now. But I wanted to understand why. Why would this woman who had everything, a successful husband, a beautiful home, plenty of money, want to kill her mother-in-law? So I did some digging. I hired a private investigator, a retired police detective named Sarah Martinez, who specialized in financial crimes. What Sarah found explained everything. Christina wasn't from money. She was from debt. Her family's wealth was a facade built on credit cards and loans. Her father had declared bankruptcy twice. Her mother was being sued by 3 different creditors, and Christina herself had over $100,000 in personal debt that Marcus knew nothing about. Shopping addiction, Sarah said. Designer clothes, jewelry, handbags. Christina had been hiding the bills for years. But here's the interesting part. Marcus had a life insurance policy, a big one, $2 million, that Tom and I had set up when he was born. The beneficiary was originally me, but when Marcus got married, he changed it to Christina. Standard stuff. What wasn't standard was the second policy Christina had taken out on Marcus 6 months ago without really explaining it to him. Another $1 million. And if something happened to Marcus while I was still alive, I'd probably help raise their future children, be involved in their lives, maybe even help financially. But if I died first and then something happened to Marcus, well, Christina would get $3 million with no mother-in-law around to ask uncomfortable questions. My investigator also found something else. Christina had been researching my finances. She'd somehow accessed my bank records, my investment accounts, everything. She knew exactly how much I was worth. About $1.2 million between the house, the investments, and the life insurance money from Tom. In Christina's mind, I wasn't just an annoying mother-in-law. I was a piggy bank that needed to be broken open. And the fastest way to do that was to make me disappear and convince Marcus that his grieving widow needed his full support, including financial support, to get through the tragedy of losing his mother. It was actually brilliant in a sociopathic kind of way. So I planned Thanksgiving dinner. I called Marcus myself, not waiting for Christina to make excuses about why they couldn't come. I told him I was feeling lonely, that the holidays were hard without his father, and that it would mean the world to me if they could spend Thanksgiving at my house. I may have laid it on a little thick, mentioning how I wasn't getting any younger and how precious family time was. Marcus agreed immediately. He sounded guilty, which was exactly what I was counting on. Christina wasn't happy about it. I could hear her in the background making protests, but Marcus put his foot down for once. We were having Thanksgiving at Mom's house, and that was final. I had 2 weeks to prepare, not just the meal, but the stage. I repositioned cameras to cover every angle of the kitchen and dining room. I installed a new system that would stream to a secure cloud server. So even if Christina somehow found and destroyed the cameras, the footage would be safe. I bought new testing kits, and I called my lawyer. Bill Patterson had handled Tom's estate and had been our family attorney for 20 years. I told him everything, showed him all the evidence I'd collected. Bill was horrified, but he was also practical. "Carol," he said, "you need to go to the police right now. This woman is trying to murder you." But I had a better idea. "Bill," I said, "if I go to the police now with what I have, what happens? Best case scenario, she gets arrested for attempted poisoning. Maybe she goes to jail for a few years. Maybe she doesn't. She gets a good lawyer, claims the substances were accidents, that she thought she was grabbing the wrong bottle, that I'm a paranoid old woman making things up. Meanwhile, Marcus is destroyed, his marriage is ruined, and Christina gets to play the victim." Bill nodded slowly. He understood where I was going, but if I catch her in the act, on video, with multiple witnesses, with fresh evidence that can be tested immediately, with a clear motive that I can prove, then there's no way out for her. Then she goes to prison for a long time, and Marcus sees exactly who he married. Bill agreed to be on standby. We set up a signal. If I texted him the word turkey during Thanksgiving dinner, He would call the police immediately and come to my house with the evidence we'd compiled. He'd bring everything, the previous videos, the financial investigation, the timeline, all of it. We also brought in Sarah Martinez, my investigator. She would be parked outside my house during dinner, watching the live camera feeds, ready to serve as an additional witness. And I called one more person, my sister Diane. Diane is 5 years older than me, a retired nurse, and possibly the most no-nonsense woman you'll ever meet. When I told her what was happening, she was on a plane from Phoenix the next day. Diane stayed with me the week before Thanksgiving, helping me prepare. We cooked all the side dishes in advance, everything except the turkey and the items Christina had specifically volunteered to bring. Christina had insisted on making her famous sweet potato casserole and her special cranberry sauce. How convenient. Diane and I made backup versions of both dishes and hid them in the garage refrigerator. If Christina poisoned her contributions, we'd have clean replacements ready. We weren't taking any chances. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke up with a strange feeling of calm. I'd been working toward this day for months, and now it was finally here. Either I was about to expose a would-be murderer, or I was about to discover I'd been completely wrong and paranoid. Honestly, I was hoping for paranoid. I didn't want to believe that someone could be this evil. But hope isn't a strategy, and I'd seen too much evidence to ignore reality. Marcus and Christina arrived at 2 in the afternoon. Marcus was carrying a bottle of wine and looked genuinely happy to be there. Christina was carrying her casserole dish and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was dressed like she was going to a country club, designer dress, expensive jewelry, perfect makeup. I was in my comfortable jeans and a sweater Tom had given me 15 years ago. The contrast wasn't accidental. "Carol," Christina said, kissing the air near my cheek, "what a lovely home. We really should visit more often." "We should," I agreed, taking the casserole dish from her hands. "This looks delicious. Did you use your grandmother's recipe?" "I did," she lied smoothly. "It's been in the family for generations." Christina's grandmother was alive and well in a nursing home in Connecticut, and according to Sarah's investigation, she'd never cooked a day in her life. They'd had a full-time chef when Christina was growing up, back before the money ran out, but I just smiled and carried the dish to the kitchen. Diane was already there, putting the finishing touches on the turkey. "Christina, you remember my sister Diane, don't you?" "Of course." Christina's smile tightened. "Diane, how nice to see you again." Diane gave her a look that could freeze water. "Christina," she said flatly, and went back to basting the turkey. The tension was immediate and obvious. Marcus tried to smooth it over by opening the wine and pouring glasses for everyone. He was chattering nervously about his work, about the new project he was managing, about anything to fill the uncomfortable silence. I felt sorry for him, actually. He had no idea what was about to happen. We made small talk for the next hour while the turkey finished cooking. Christina kept checking her watch, which I found interesting. Was she on a timeline? Did she have somewhere to be? Or was she just anxious to get this over with? At 3:30, we sat down to eat. The dining room table was set beautifully, my good china that Tom and I had received as a wedding gift. The crystal glasses, the silver flatware, everything was perfect. Everything was about to go very wrong, and I was ready. Marcus said grace, something about being thankful for family and togetherness and blessings. I watched Christina's face during the prayer. She looked serene, peaceful, like a woman without a care in the world, like a woman who wasn't planning to poison her mother-in-law in the next 15 minutes. We started passing dishes around the table. Turkey, stuffing, green bean casserole, rolls, my famous mashed potatoes. Everything was going smoothly until we got to Christina's sweet potato casserole. She served herself first, a tiny portion, then passed the dish to Marcus. He took a large serving. He'd always loved sweet potatoes. Then the dish came to me. "This looks amazing, Christina," I said warmly. "I can't wait to try it. I'm going to get some water first, though. I've been cooking all day and I'm parched." I stood up and headed toward the kitchen, pulling my phone from my pocket as I went. In the bathroom just off the kitchen, I pulled up the camera app and switched to the dining room view. The video feed was crystal clear. I watched as Christina looked around nervously, checking to make sure I was really gone. Marcus was focused on his plate, cutting into his turkey. Diane had excused herself to get more wine from the kitchen, perfectly timed like we'd planned. Christina was alone at the table for maybe 20 seconds. That's all she needed. I watched her reach into the designer purse hanging on her chair. She pulled out a small brown bottle, the same type I'd seen before. Her hands were shaking slightly as she unscrewed the cap. She glanced toward the kitchen one more time, then quickly added several drops to my serving of sweet potato casserole. Not to the whole dish, just to my portion on my plate. She was being careful, calculated. If I got sick and they tested the main dish, it would come up clean. Only my plate would be contaminated. It was smart, actually. She stirred my food quickly with my fork to mix in whatever she'd added, then dropped the bottle back in her purse. The whole thing took maybe 15 seconds. When Diane walked back into the dining room with the wine, Christina was calmly eating her turkey like nothing had happened. I stayed in the bathroom for another minute, letting my heart rate slow down. This was it. This was the proof I needed. Fresh and undeniable. I'd watched her poison my food in real time. The video was already uploaded to the cloud, already in Bill Patterson's hands, already being watched by Sarah Martinez in the car outside. I flushed the toilet for effect and washed my hands, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked calm, composed, maybe a little tired from cooking all day. I didn't look like a woman who just watched someone try to kill her. I didn't look like a woman who was about to destroy her son's marriage and send her daughter-in-law to prison. But that's exactly what I was about to do. Hen. I returned to the dining room. Christina looked up with that fake smile. Everything okay, Carol? Just fine, I said pleasantly. You know how it is at my age. The bladder isn't what it used to be. I sat down and picked up my fork. Christina was watching me intently now, trying not to be obvious about it, but failing. Diane was also watching, but her gaze was on Christina, cold and evaluating. Marcus was obliviously eating his dinner, complimenting my cooking. I took a small bite of the turkey. Delicious. A bite of stuffing. Perfect. Then I scooped up a forkful of Christina's sweet potato casserole. This looks so good, Christina. I raised the fork toward my mouth. Christina's entire body was tense, leaning forward slightly. Her eyes were locked on that fork. This was the moment she'd been planning for months. This was when the annoying mother-in-law finally got what was coming to her. This was when Christina's problems started solving themselves. I put the fork in my mouth. The casserole was actually pretty good, sweet and creamy, with a nice crust of pecans on top. Whatever she'd added didn't affect the taste, at least not in a small bite. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and reached for my water glass. Christina exhaled just slightly. Some of the tension left her shoulders. I took another bite, then another. Marcus was telling a story about something that happened at his office. Diane was making appropriate listening noises. Christina was pretending to eat, but mostly pushing food around her plate. And I kept eating that poisoned casserole, bite after bite, watching Christina's confidence grow with each swallow. After about 5 minutes and maybe 6 bites of the contaminated food, I set down my fork. I'm not feeling well, I said quietly. The conversation stopped immediately. Mom, what's wrong? Marcus asked, concerned. I don't know. I feel dizzy. My stomach hurts. I put my hand to my forehead. It was easy to act sick when I was imagining what would actually be happening if I'd really eaten what was on my plate. Christina was trying to look concerned, but I could see it in her eyes. Excitement, anticipation. This was working. Carol, maybe you should lie down, Christina suggested. You've been working so hard today. All this cooking at your age, it's a lot of stress on the system. At my age. There it was again. I'm sure I'm fine, I said weakly. Maybe I just need some air. I started to stand up and deliberately stumbled, catching myself on the table. The dishes rattled. Marcus jumped up to help me. Mom, I'm calling an ambulance. No, no, I protested, but my voice was faint. I just need to rest for a minute. Diane was at my other side now, helping Marcus guide me toward the living room couch. Behind us, Christina was still sitting at the table. I couldn't see her face, but I could imagine it. She was probably calculating how long the poison would take to work, whether she should encourage Marcus to call for help or wait a little longer, how to act appropriately grief-stricken when the old woman didn't wake up. They laid me on the couch, and Diane put a pillow under my head. Marcus was on his phone, actually dialing 911. That's when I opened my eyes, sat up completely normally, and said, "You can hang up, honey. I'm not actually sick." Marcus stared at me in confusion. "What? But you said you were dizzy." I lied. I looked past him to where Christina had followed us into the living room. She was standing very still, her face pale. I think she was beginning to understand that something was very wrong. "Christina," I said calmly, "would you like to tell my son what you put in my food? Or should I show him the video?" The silence in that room was absolute. Marcus looked between me and Christina like he'd missed several important parts of the conversation. "Mom, what are you talking about? What video?" I held up my phone and turned it so he could see the screen. I'd already queued up the footage to the exact moment Christina pulled the bottle from her pee. "Urs." We all watched as camera Christina looked around nervously, reached into her bag, and added drops from the brown bottle to my plate of food. The video was perfectly clear. No question about what was happening. "That's not what it looks like," Christina said, but her voice was shaking. "Marcus, I can explain." "Explain what?" Marcus said slowly. His face had gone from confused to horrified. "Christina, what did you put in Mom's food?" "It was just a supplement," Christina stammered. "Carol mentioned she was having trouble sleeping, so I brought some natural melatonin to help her relax. I thought I was doing something nice." I smiled coldly. "That's interesting, because this isn't the first time you've added things to my food or drink." I swiped to the next video, the one from October, coffee being doctored, then September, the cookies, then August, the water glass. For each video, I provided the date, the substance that was added, and the test results I'd had done. Marcus was watching the screen with growing horror, his face getting redder with each clip. Christina was backing toward the door. "Marcus, she's crazy," Christina said desperately. "She's paranoid. She's been setting me up. Those videos are edited. She's had it out for me since the day we got married." "Is that why you access my bank records without permission?" I asked. "Is that why you research my investment accounts and my property value? Is that why you took out $1 million life insurance policy on my son 6 months ago?" Marcus's head snapped toward Christina. "You did what?" "It's standard financial planning," Christina said weakly. "Couples take out policies on each other all the time. Combined with Marcus's existing policy, you'd get $3 million if something happened to him," I said. $3 million and no nosy mother-in-law around to ask questions about your $100,000 in secret debt. Marcus looked like I'd slapped him. "What debt?" "Oh, this keeps getting better," Diane said from her position near the couch. She was filming everything on her own phone now, backup documentation. "Christina's from a family that's bankrupt twice over," I continued. "Her father, her mother, everyone drowning in debt, and Christina herself has been hiding massive shopping addiction bills from you for your entire marriage. Designer bags, jewelry, clothes, over $100,000 charged to secret credit cards." "That's a lie," Christina shouted. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can." I pulled a folder from under the couch cushion where I'd hidden it earlier. Financial records, credit card statements, bankruptcy filings, all of it compiled by a licensed private investigator. I tossed the folder on the coffee table. Marcus picked it up with shaking hands and started reading. His face went from red to white. "You've been lying to me," he said quietly. "About everything. Marcus, baby, you have to understand. I was going to tell you. I was going to get help. I just needed a little more time." "Time for what?" I interrupted. "Time to kill me and collect my inheritance? Time to poison my son and collect the life insurance? Time to pay off your debts with blood money?" "I didn't poison anyone," Christina screamed. "You're making this all up. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand that your son loves someone besides you. Then you won't mind if we test the food on my plate," I said calmly. "In fact, the police are probably very interested in testing it." Right on cue, there was a knock at the door. Diane went to answer it. 2 police officers stood on my porch, and behind them was Bill Patterson carrying a briefcase, and behind him was Sarah Martinez with a laptop. Bill had gotten my text signal the moment Christina poisoned the food. He'd called the police, and they'd been waiting outside for my call to come in. "Evening, officers," I said. "Thank you for coming. I believe we have an attempted murder to report." The next 30 minutes were chaos. Christina tried to run, and one of tea. Officers stopped her. She screamed that this was all a misunderstanding, that I was senile and confused, that the videos were fake. Marcus sat on my couch staring at the financial records like they were written in a foreign language. Bill Patterson calmly explained the situation to the officers while showing them the compiled evidence. Sarah Martinez provided her investigator credentials and testified to what she'd witnessed on the live feed. Diane offered her professional opinion as a retired nurse about the symptoms I would have experienced if I'd actually consumed the poisoned food. And I handed over my plate of sweet potato casserole, still sitting on the dining room table, for immediate testing. The officers also confiscated the brown bottle from Christina's purse. She tried to claim she didn't know what I was talking about, that there was no bottle. But when they searched her bag, there it was, still half full of liquid. The officer held it up to the light and read the label. "This says organic sleep aid, but it doesn't have any manufacturer information or ingredient list." "That's a red flag right there. We'll need to get this tested." Christina was handcuffed. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, that perfect makeup finally ruined. "Marcus, please," she begged. "Tell them this is all a mistake. Tell them your mother is confused." But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom," he said quietly, "why didn't you just call the police the first time?" "Because I needed to be sure," I said. "And I needed you to see it with your own eyes." If I'd gone to the police with just one video, Christina would have hired a good lawyer and convinced you I was making it all up. She would have played the victim, and you would have believed her because you love her. But now you've seen everything. The pattern, the motive, the evidence. Now you know exactly who you married. Marcus put his head in his hands. "I didn't want to be right," I said softly. "I wanted to be a paranoid old woman seeing threats that didn't exist. I wanted you to be happy, but I couldn't ignore what was happening." The officers took Christina away. She was still protesting, still crying, still insisting this was all a terrible misunderstanding. They told me they'd need me to come to the station to give a formal statement, that detectives would want to interview me, that this was going to be a long process. I said I understood. After they left, it was just Marcus, Diane, Bill, Sarah, and me standing in my living room. The Thanksgiving dinner sat abandoned on the dining room table, getting cold. All that work, all that preparation, and nobody was eating. "Bill," I said, "thank you for coming so quickly." He nodded. "Carol, you did the right thing. This woman is dangerous. She would have killed you if you'd given her the chance." "I know." I looked at my son, still sitting on the couch looking shattered. "Marcus, honey, I'm sorry." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "You're sorry, Mom? She tried to kill you multiple times. And I brought her into your house. I let her treat you badly for years. I looked at assisted living facilities because she convinced me you were declining. I'm the one who should be sorry. You didn't know. She was good at hiding who she really was. I was good at making excuses for her." Marcus stood up and hugged me, actually hugged me for the first time in probably 2 years. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening." We stood there for a moment, and I let myself feel relieved. Not happy, exactly. There was no happiness in this situation, but relieved that my son was safe, that I was safe, that the truth was finally out in the open. Diane cleared her throat. "I hate to break up this moment, but that turkey is getting cold, and I didn't spend 6 hours cooking for nothing. We're still eating Thanksgiving dinner, right?" We looked at her like she was insane. "Dion," he shrugged. "What?" "The food is perfectly good, except for the poisoned casserole, which we're leaving for evidence. We have a backup dish in the garage. We have a beautiful turkey. We have family together. We're eating." Sarah Martinez laughed. "I like her. Can I stay?" Bill looked uncertain. I should probably get back to the office and start preparing the legal documentation. You should probably eat first, I said. Who knows how long this night is going to be. So that's how we ended up having the strangest Thanksgiving dinner of my life. We threw out Christina's poisoned casserole and brought in the clean one Diane and I had made as backup. We reheated everything that had gotten cold. We set an extra place for Sarah, and the 5 of us sat down at my dining room table and ate turkey while discussing attempted murder like it was normal dinner conversation. Sarah told us what she'd observed from her car, how she'd watched the live feed and seen Christina add the substance to my food, how she documented everything with timestamps and screenshots. Bill talked about the legal process ahead, how Christina would be charged with attempted murder, how the previous incidents would factor into the case, how the financial motive would strengthen the prosecution. Marcus mostly stayed quiet, eating mechanically, looking like someone had hit him with a hammer. Occasionally, he'd ask a question: how long had I known? When did I install the cameras? Why didn't I tell him sooner? I answered everything honestly. I'd suspected something was wrong for months, but I needed proof. The cameras went in after I found the assisted living brochures. I didn't tell him because I needed him to see the truth himself, not hear it from me and have to choose who to believe. At one point, Marcus asked the question I'd been dreading. Did you really eat the poisoned food, Mom? Or was that all acting? I ate a small amount, I admitted. Enough to make it believable, but not enough to actually hurt me. I had activated charcoal tablets ready in the bathroom to take immediately after to absorb anything I'd ingested. Sarah had emergency medical equipment in her car just in case. Diane was prepared to administer first aid if needed. We had contingency plans for every scenario. You risked your life, Marcus said. To prove a point, to save your life, I corrected. Marcus, if I hadn't stopped her today, Christina would have tried again. And eventually she would have succeeded. And then 6 months or a year later, something would have happened to you. A car accident, a medical emergency, something that looked natural but wasn't. And she'd have walked away with $3 million and nobody would have suspected a thing. The table went quiet. It was true and we all knew it. Christina wasn't going to stop at just killing me. I was just the first obstacle in her way. Diane changed the subject by complimenting the turkey. We spent the rest of the meal talking about normal things, memories of past Thanksgiving, stories about Tom, updates on Diane's kids in Arizona. We were trying to give Marcus some breathing room, some normalcy in the middle of this nightmare. After dinner, Sarah excused herself to drive home. Bill left to start working on the legal case. Diane began clearing the table, and I helped her. Marcus sat in the living room staring at nothing. In the kitchen, Diane spoke quietly. How are you really doing? I thought about it. I'm okay, tired, sad for Marcus, but okay. You were incredibly brave today. Or incredibly stupid, maybe both. Definitely both, Diane agreed, but it worked. She's going away for a long time, I know. I loaded plates into the dishwasher. Diane, can you stay for a few days? Marcus is going to need support, and I don't think I'm enough right now. I'm staying as long as you need me, she said firmly. We're family. We finished cleaning up in silence. When we went back to the living room, Marcus was on his phone, scrolling through something. He looked up when we entered. I'm looking at our bank accounts, he said. Our joint accounts. There are charges here I never saw before. Charges she must have hidden somehow. Restaurants I never went to. Stores I never shopped at. It's all been right here the whole time and I never looked. You trusted her, I said. That's not a character flaw, Marcus. Yes, it is. He set down his phone. I trusted her over you. My own mother. When she said you were declining, I believed her without question. When she suggested assisted living, I actually researched facilities. I was planning to have a conversation with you about moving, about giving up your independence. I was going to take away everything you'd worked for because my wife told me you couldn't handle it anymore. And I never once stopped to verify if it was true. Marcus, she was convincing. She had me doubting myself sometimes, wondering if maybe I really was getting forgetful, if maybe I really was becoming a burden. That's what manipulators do. They make you question your own reality. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that broke my heart. I don't know how I'm going to recover from this. How do you trust anyone again after something like this? You take it one day at a time, Diane said from the doorway. You see a therapist. You lean on family. You give yourself permission to feel angry and betrayed and stupid and everything else. And eventually, slowly, you start to heal. Does it ever stop hurting? Marcus asked. She thought about it. The hurt changes. It becomes less sharp, more of a dull ache. And someday you'll realize an entire hour went by when you didn't think about it. Then a day, then a week. It never completely goes away, but it stops controlling your life. Marcus nodded. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in one evening. Mom, can I stay here tonight? I don't want to go back to our apartment, the apartment we shared. I can't be there right now. Of course, honey. Your old room is exactly how you left it. He managed a weak smile. With the Star Wars posters, I never took them down. Something about that small detail, that evidence of the child he used to be, still preserved in my house, made him tear up again. We sat together for a while, not talking, just being present. Eventually, Marcus went upstairs to his old room. Diane and I stayed in the living room. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the same clock that had marked time through Marcus's childhood, through Tom's death, through all the years I'd lived here alone. You did good today, Diane said. I destroyed my son's marriage. You saved your son's life, she corrected. There's a difference. The next few days were a blur of police statements, detective interviews, and lawyer meetings. The brown bottle Christina had used contained a concentrated liquid sedative, the kind that's prescription only and definitely not something you can buy at a health food store labeled as organic sleep aid. The police traced it back to an online black market pharmacy. Christina had been buying this stuff for months, along with other substances. The sweet potato casserole on my plate tested positive for enough sedative to cause respiratory failure in someone my age and weight. If I'd eaten the entire serving, I would have felt drowsy within 20 minutes, fallen asleep within an hour, and possibly never woken up. The medical examiner said it would have looked like natural causes, just an older woman who went to sleep after a big Thanksgiving meal and didn't wake up. Heart failure, they probably would have said. Maybe a stroke. No one would have ordered an autopsy for a 58-year-old woman with no history of foul play. Christina's plan would have worked perfectly. The other incidents were harder to prove since I didn't have the actual contaminated food anymore, but the videos were damning. Christina's lawyer tried to argue that the videos were edited or taken out of context, but digital forensic. Experts confirmed they were authentic. The timeline matched. The behavior pattern was clear. And when the police searched Christina and Marcus's apartment, they found more evidence. Internet search history on her laptop about undetectable poisons, about inheritance laws, about how long it takes for life insurance to pay out after a death. She'd been researching this for over a year. They also found documents about my finances that she'd somehow obtained, printouts of my bank statements and investment portfolios. She'd been tracking every dollar I had. In her journal, which apparently she'd been keeping hidden in her car, there were entries about me, page after page of complaints about the annoying mother-in-law who wouldn't die already, about how much easier life would be without me around, about how she deserved my money more than I did because she was young and I was just wasting it on a life that was almost over anyway. The prosecutor called it the most clear-cut case of premeditated attempted murder she'd seen in 15 years. Christina was denied bail. Flight risk, the judge said. She had access to money through credit cards, no real family ties in the area, and a demonstrated willingness to harm others. She'd sit in jail until trial. Marcus took a leave of absence from work. He couldn't focus, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. He stayed in his childhood bedroom and barely came out except for meals. I'd hear him on the phone sometimes, talking to his therapist, talking to friends, trying to explain what had happened. How do you tell people your wife tried to murder your mother? Diane stayed with us for 2 weeks before she had to go back to Arizona. Before she left, she pulled me aside. He's going to be okay, you know, eventually. I know. But you need to be okay too, Carol. You've been so focused on taking care of Marcus that you haven't dealt with your own trauma. Someone tried to kill you multiple times. That does something to a person. I'll deal with it, I said. Later, after Marcus is better. No, Diane said firmly. Now. You deal with it now. Because if you don't process this, if you just shove it down and pretend you are fine, it's going to come back and hit you when you least expect it. See a therapist. Talk to someone. Don't try to be strong all the time. She was right, of course. After Diane left, I called a therapist. Dr. Rebecca Walsh specialized in trauma and family violence. Our first session was awkward. I spent most of it explaining what had happened, going through the timeline, showing her the evidence I'd collected. Dr. Walsh listened without judgment. At the end, she asked me one question. How do you feel about what happened? I opened my mouth to say I was fine, that I was just glad it was over, that I was focused on helping Marcus heal. But what came out instead was, I'm angry. Angry at Christina, obviously, but also angry at Marcus for believing her over me, angry at myself for not going to the police sooner, angry that I had to risk my own life to prove what was happening, angry that my Thanksgiving was ruined, angry that I can't feel safe in my own home anymore because every time I eat something, I wonder if it's contaminated, angry that I'm 58 years old and instead of enjoying my retirement and spoiling future grandchildren, I'm testifying in a murder trial. Dr. Walsh nodded. That's a lot of anger. It's all legitimate. What are you going to do with it? I didn't have an answer, so we worked on finding one. Over the next few months, I saw Dr. Walsh twice a week. We talked about trust and betrayal. We talked about the cameras I'd installed and whether I'd ever feel comfortable taking them down. We talked about my relationship with Marcus and how to rebuild it. We talked about the guilt I felt for bringing Christina into our lives, even though rationally I knew I couldn't have predicted what she'd become. And we talked about moving forward. Marcus started coming out of his room more. He began cooking dinner sometimes, helping with housework, trying to contribute. We'd watch movies together in the evenings, old favorites from when he was a kid. We didn't talk about Christina unless we had to, for legal reasons. Mostly, we just existed together, two broken people trying to figure out how to be a family again. 3 months after Thanksgiving, Marcus came downstairs one morning and announced he was going back to work. Part-time at first, but he needed to do something productive. He couldn't hide in his childhood bedroom forever. I'm proud of you, I told him. He gave me a hug. Mom, I need to say something. I've been thinking about this for weeks. I was a terrible son. I let Christina drive a wedge between us. I believed her lies about you. I was planning to put you in a home, to take away your independence, all because she convinced me you were declining. And the worst part is I never even talked to you about it. I just accepted her version of reality without checking. I never asked how you were really doing. I never spent time with you to see for myself. I chose her over you, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Marcus, you were manipulated by someone you loved and trusted. That's not your fault. It is my fault, he insisted. I'm an adult. I made choices, bad choices, and I need to own that and do better. We stood in the kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the windows, and I realized my son had finally grown up. It had taken a nightmare to get here, but he'd finally learned that love requires more than just feelings. It requires attention, effort, and verification. The trial was scheduled for June. Christina's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested. The evidence was too strong, the crime too serious. This was going to trial, and Christina was going to face the full consequences of her actions. In April, I got a letter from Christina. It was sent from the jail, several pages of handwritten desperation. She wanted me to know she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that she'd been under so much stress from her debt that she wasn't thinking clearly. She blamed her parents for raising her with expensive tastes and no financial sense. She blamed Marcus for not making enough money to support her lifestyle. She blamed society for making women feel like they needed designer things to be valuable. She blamed everyone except herself. At the end of the letter, she asked me to drop the charges. She suggested we could work this out as a family. She promised if I gave her another chance, she'd get help for her issues and never bother me again. She even offered to divorce Marcus quietly and disappear from our lives forever if I'd just tell the prosecutor I'd made a mistake, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. I showed the letter to Bill Patterson. He read it and laughed. "This is actually helpful," he said. "It's an admission that something happened, even if she's trying to minimize it. The prosecutor will love this. I didn't respond to Christina's letter. There was nothing to say. She tried to kill me multiple times, and the only thing she was sorry about was getting caught. 2 weeks before the trial, Marcus asked if he could talk to me about something serious. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd revealed Christina's crimes on Thanksgiving. "Mom, I've been thinking about the future, my future, and I need your advice." "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" He took a deep breath. "I don't think I want to get married again, maybe not ever. I don't trust my judgment anymore. If I could be that wrong about Christina, how can I trust myself to choose a partner? You can't let one bad experience ruin your entire future," I said gently. "Not everyone is like Christina. I know that logically, but emotionally I'm not there yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Right now, I just want to focus on rebuilding my life, being a better son, working on myself." "That sounds healthy, actual." Marcus smiled slightly. "I've also been thinking about living arrangements. My lease is up next month, and I've been looking at apartments. But honestly, I don't want to live alone right now. I'm not ready. So I wanted to ask, would it be okay if I stayed here for a while longer? Just until I feel more stable. You can stay as long as you need," I said. "This is your home. Always has been. But Marcus, I want to make sure you're staying because it's what you need, not because you feel obligated to protect me or take care of me. I'm staying because I want to be here," he said. "Because I missed too many years of having a relationship with you, and I want to fix that. Because you're my mom, and I love you, and I'm not going to take you for granted anymore." We talked for a long time that evening about expectations and boundaries, about what living together as adults would look like, about respecting each other's space and independence. It felt good to have these conversations, to build something intentional instead of just falling into old patterns. The trial started on a Monday in June. The courthouse was old and imposing, with marble floors and high ceilings that made everything echo. Marcus and I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table. Bill Patterson sat with us for moral support. Christina was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking thin and pale. She'd lost weight in jail. Her hair had grown out and her roots were showing. Without the designer clothes and professional makeup, she looked ordinary, younger, almost vulnerable. But I'd seen what was underneath that vulnerable exterior. I'd watched her methodically plan to murder me. I wasn't fooled by appearances anymore. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecutor presented the videos, the financial evidence, the test results from the poisoned food, the internet search history, the journal entries. Expert witnesses testified about the substances Christina had used, about the lethal dosages, about the premeditation required to carry out such a plan. Sarah Martinez testified about her investigation into Christina's finances and what she'd discovered about the debt and the insurance policies. Diane testified about what she'd witnessed on Thanksgiving Day. Bill Patterson testified about the legal consultation and the evidence I'd brought to him. And I testified. For 3 days, I sat in the witness box and told my story. Christina's lawyer tried to make me look paranoid, obsessive, vindictive. He suggested I'd installed cameras because I was jealous of my son's wife, that I'd manipulated the evidence because I wanted to break up their marriage, that I'd deliberately provoked Christina into doing things that looked bad on camera. But the evidence spoke for itself. The prosecutor asked me the most important question on the second day of my testimony. "Mrs. Henderson, why didn't you just call the police after the first incident? Why go through this elaborate process of gathering evidence?" I looked directly at the jury when I answered, "Because I'm a 58-year-old woman, and I know how the world works. If I'd called the police after the first incident and said my daughter-in-law was trying to poison me, they would have looked at me like I was a hysterical old lady. They would have talked to Christina. She would have cried and said she didn't know what I was talking about, and they would have left. And then Christina would have been more careful next time. She would have made sure there were no witnesses, no evidence, nothing to prove what she'd done. And eventually, I'd be dead, and everyone would think it was natural causes. I needed irrefutable proof, multiple instances, clear motive, video documentation, everything that would make it impossible to dismiss or ignore, because women my age are invisible. We're not taken seriously. And I knew that if I was going to survive this, I had to build a case so airtight that no one could ignore it. The courtroom was absolutely silent when I finished. Several jury members were nodding. They understood. Christina's lawyer tried to recover by asking why I'd risked eating the poisoned food on Thanksgiving instead of just showing the video immediately. Because Christina's lawyer would have argued the video was staged, I explained, that I doctored it somehow, or that Christina was reaching for something innocent and I'd made it look suspicious. But with me actually ingesting the poison, with fresh evidence that could be tested immediately, with witnesses watching it happen in real time, there was no room for doubt. It was proof that couldn't be explained away. On the 10th day of trial, Christina's lawyer made his final mistake. He put Christina on the stand to testify in her own defense. She wore a conservative dress that someone had brought her, probably her mother. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked like a young woman who couldn't possibly hurt anyone. She told the jury that she loved Marcus, that she'd been trying to help me because she was concerned about my health, that the supplements she'd given me were natural remedies she'd researched online. She claimed the debt was from medical bills for a condition she was embarrassed about, not from shopping. She cried when she talked about how much she missed Marcus, how this whole situation was a tragic misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. She walked Christina through every lie, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence that contradicted her story. She showed Christina her own journal entries and asked her to explain them. She showed her the search history for undetectable poisons and asked what medical condition required that research. She asked about the insurance policies, about accessing my financial records, about the specific substances found in the brown bottle. Christina fell apart on the stand. She started crying, then got angry, then tried to deflect, then cried again. By the end of the cross-examination, even her own lawyer looked defeated. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the four women stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts, attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, identity theft for accessing my financial records without permission, and several other charges I'd lost track of. Christina's mother screamed from the back of the courtroom. Christina collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Marcus sat beside me with his head bowed, not crying exactly, but not celebrating either. There was no joy in this moment, just a grim satisfaction that justice had been served. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The prosecutor told us she'd be asking for the maximum, 25 years to life. With the premeditation, the multiple attempts, the clear financial motive, and Christina's complete lack of remorse except when it benefited her, the judge would likely give it to her. We left the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid the media. Somehow the story had gotten picked up by local news, and there were reporters everywhere. Woman poisons mother-in-law at Thanksgiving made for great headlines, apparently. At home, Marcus and I sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "It's really over." "Yes," I agreed. "How do you feel?" He thought about it. "Empty. Like I should feel something more, but I just feel hollow." "That's normal," I said. "You loved her, or you loved who you thought she was. Grieving that person is legitimate, even if that person never really existed." "Did you ever like her?" Marcus asked. In the beginning, I considered the question honestly. I wanted to like her. I wanted you to be happy. But there was always something off about Christina, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The way she'd smile at me, but it never reached her eyes. The way she'd compliment me, but there was always a barb hidden in it. The way she'd talk about money constantly. about what things cost, about who had what. I thought maybe it was just a personality difference, that maybe I was being judgmental. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. "I wish you told me," Marcus said. "Would you have listened?" He was quiet. We both knew the answer. In those early years of his marriage, Marcus had been so in love, so convinced Christina was perfect that he wouldn't have heard anything negative about her. He would have defended her and pulled away from me even more. Sometimes the only way people learn is through their own experience, no matter how painful. The sentencing hearing was smaller, quieter than the trial. Christina's lawyer made a plea for leniency, talking about her difficult childhood, her mental health struggles, her potential for rehabilitation. The prosecutor presented victim impact statements. I'd written mine carefully, trying to express the fear I'd lived with, the betrayal I'd felt, the violation of having someone in my home who wanted me dead. But I also talked about the impact on Marcus, how he'd lost years of his life to this woman, how he'd have trust issues potentially forever, how his family had been destroyed. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I stood up. "Your Honor, I don't hate Christina. I feel sorry for her. She's a young woman who valued money and appearances more than human life, and that's a tragedy. But I also know that she's dangerous. She planned my murder methodically. Over the course of months, she researched poisons. She accessed my financial information illegally. She lied to my son repeatedly. She created an elaborate web of deception and was only stopped because I happened to be paranoid enough to install cameras. If I'd been trusting, if I'd been less observant, I'd be dead right now. And I believe, based on the evidence, that my son would have been next." Christina sees people as obstacles or assets, nothing more. I don't believe she can be rehabilitated because I don't believe she sees anything wrong with what she did. She's only sorry she got caught. So I'm asking you to give her the maximum sentence, not out of vengeance, but out of protection. Protection for me, for my son, and for whatever other family members she might target in the future if given the opportunity. The judge listened to everything, reviewed the evidence one more time, and sentenced Christina to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20. Christina would be 49 years old before she could even apply for parole. Her 20s, 30s, and most of her 40s would be spent behind bars. As they led her away, Christina looked back at Marcus one last time. Her mouth formed the words, "I love you," but Marcus turned away. He didn't watch her go. Outside the courthouse, Marcus took a deep breath of fresh air. "I need to do something," he said. "I need to make a change, something positive." "What are you thinking?" "I want to go back to school, get my MBA, actually understand business and finance instead of just drifting through my career. Maybe start my own company someday, build something real instead of just existing." I smiled. "I think that's an excellent idea. Will you help me? Teach me what you know about business and investing and managing money? I realized during this whole thing that I'm financially illiterate. Christina hid $100,000 in debt from me and I never noticed. I didn't understand our bank accounts or our credit cards or anything. I just trusted her to handle it. That can't happen again. I need to be competent." "I'd be happy to teach you," I said. "We can start this weekend if you want." Over the next year, Marcus and I developed a routine. He went back to work full-time and started taking evening MBA classes. On weekends, we'd sit at my dining room table, and I'd teach him about budgeting, investing, credit scores, insurance policies, estate planning, all the financial literacy skills that somehow get left out of. Formal education. He was a good student, asking smart questions, taking detailed notes, actually applying what he learned. He paid off Christina's debt using their joint assets and his own savings. He refinanced his car loan to get a better interest rate. He started contributing to a retirement account. He built an emergency fund. He learned to read financial statements and understand where his money was going. Watching him take control of his financial life was satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. This was the opposite of what Christina had done. Hiding and manipulating and deceiving. This was transparency and competence and responsibility. Dr. Walsh and I continued our therapy sessions, gradually reducing from twice a week to once a week to twice a month. We talked about my trust issues, about the cameras I still hadn't removed from my house, about my hypervigilance around food and drinks. She helped me develop strategies for managing the anxiety, for recognizing when my fear was proportional to actual threat versus when it was trauma response. Slowly, very slowly, I started to feel safe again in my own home. I took down some of the cameras, though I kept the ones covering the entrances and main living areas. I started accepting dinner invitations from friends again. I even tried cooking Thanksgiving dinner the following year, though I'll admit my hands were shaking when I served the sweet potato casserole. But we got through it. Marcus, Diane, who flew in for the holiday, Bill Patterson, who'd become a good friend, Sarah Martinez, who'd stayed in touch, and me. 5 people who'd been connected by trauma, but who'd chosen to stay connected by choice. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, the way families do on Thanksgiving. When it was my turn, I said, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for second chances. I'm grateful for cameras and lawyers and sisters and investigators and sons who do the work to become better men. I'm grateful that justice exists even when it's hard to achieve. And I'm grateful for this meal, which nobody poisoned. Everyone laughed. That slightly uncomfortable laugh of people who know the joke is based on something terrible, but who need the humor anyway. Life moved forward the way it always does, one day at a time. Marcus graduated with his MBA 2 years after Christina went to prison. I attended his graduation ceremony and felt a pride that had nothing to do with the degree itself and everything to do with the man he'd become. He'd worked full-time, gone to school at night, and still made time to have dinner with me twice a week. He'd done the hard work of therapy, of examining his choices, of learning to trust his judgment again. A few months after graduation, Marcus started dating again. Her name was Jennifer, and she was a project manager at his company. He was terrified to introduce us, convinced I'd see red flags everywhere, convinced he'd make another terrible choice. But Jennifer was lovely. She was 40 years old, divorced, with 2 teenage kids from her first marriage. She had her own career, her own money, her own life. She didn't need Marcus to save her or support her or provide her with an identity. She liked him for who he was, not what he could give her. When Marcus told her about Christina, about what had happened, Jennifer's response was, "Thank God your mother was smart enough to protect you both. That must have been terrifying for her." She understood. She got it. And she never once made me feel like I was interfering or unwelcome. The first time Jennifer came to my house for dinner, I'll admit I was watching her carefully. Old habits die hard. But she helped cook. She asked permission before opening my refrigerator to get ingredients. She complimented my home without immediately asking how much it was worth. She treated me like a person, not an obstacle. After dinner, while Marcus was loading the dishwasher, Jennifer asked if we could talk privately. We out to the back porch, and I braced myself for whatever was coming. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, "I want you to know that I understand if you don't trust me. After what Christina did, after what Marcus went through, I understand if you need time to feel comfortable with me being in his life. I'm not going to rush anything or push for acceptance. I just want you to know that I care about your son, and I would never hurt him. And I respect you for doing what you had to do to protect him, even when it was hard." I looked at this woman, this stranger who was trying so hard to do the right thing, and I made a choice. "Jennifer," I said, "I appreciate that. And I'm sure you understand that I will be watching carefully, at least for a while. Not because I think you're like Christina, but because I need to protect my son. That's my job as his mother, and I take it seriously." "I'd expect nothing less," Jennifer said. "If I were in your position, I'd do the same thing." We talked for a long time that evening about boundaries and expectations, about what Marcus needed in a relationship, about Jennifer's kids and her career and her goals for the future. It was the kind of conversation I'd never had with Christina, the kind of honest, direct communication that builds trust. 6 months later, Marcus asked me what I thought about Jennifer. "I think she's good for you," I said honestly. "I think she sees you clearly, both your strengths and your weaknesses, and she chooses you anyway. I think she's emotionally mature and financially stable and has her life together." I think she makes you happy without making you dependent. I'm thinking about asking her to marry me, Marcus admitted. What do you think? I took a deep breath. This was the moment where I either let my trauma control Marcus's future or I trusted the work we'd both done to heal and grow. I think you should ask her, I said. But Marcus, I also think you should have some hard conversations first. About finances, about expectations, about what marriage means to each of you. Don't rush into it. Take your time. Make sure you're choosing each other with your eyes open. We've been having those conversations, Marcus said. Jennifer insisted on it. She said after everything I'd been through, we needed to be completely transparent about everything before making any commitments. We've shared credit reports, bank statements, career goals, everything. She even suggested a prenup to protect both of us. That's when I knew Jennifer was the real deal. She wasn't trying to hide anything or rush Marcus into commitment. She was building a foundation of honesty and trust. Marcus proposed 3 months later. Jennifer said yes. They got married in a small ceremony in my backyard, just family and close friends. Jennifer's kids were there, 2 teenagers who seemed slightly embarrassed by the whole thing, but who clearly loved their mother. Diane flew in from Arizona. Bill Patterson attended with his wife. Sarah Martinez brought her husband. It was intimate and genuine and nothing like the elaborate production that Christina had demanded. At the reception, Jennifer pulled me aside. Thank you for raising such a good man, she said, and thank you for saving his life. I wouldn't have him if you hadn't been brave enough to do what you did. We hugged and I realized that I'd gotten my family back. Not the same family as before, but something new and possibly better. Something built on truth instead of illusion. 3 years after Christina went to prison, I got a notification that she was appealing her sentence. Her lawyer claimed she'd received inadequate representation, that the evidence had been prejudicial, that the sentence was excessive. Bill Patterson assured me the appeal wouldn't go anywhere, that the case was too solid, but I still had nightmares for weeks. The appeal was denied. Christina would serve her full sentence. I didn't tell Marcus about the appeal until after it was denied. He built a good life with Jennifer, and I didn't want Christina's ghost to haunt him unnecessarily. When I finally mentioned it, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I hope she gets help in prison. I hope she learns something, becomes someone different. But I also hope I never see her again. That's fair, I said. On the 5th anniversary of Thanksgiving, when everything happened, Jennifer suggested we start a new tradition. Instead of focusing on what we'd survived, we'd focus on what we'd built. Each person would share something they'd created or accomplished in the past year, something positive that moved their life forward. Marcus talked about a promotion he'd earned at work and a new project he was leading. Jennifer talked about her daughter getting accepted to college. Her son talked about making the soccer team. Diane, visiting again, talked about volunteering at a women's shelter and helping other people escape dangerous situations. And I talked about something I'd been working on for months. I'd started writing a book about financial literacy and protecting yourself from financial abuse, about recognizing warning signs and building safeguards. I'd shared my story, including what happened with Christina, because I thought other people might benefit from understanding how manipulation works, how to spot it, how to protect yourself and your assets. The book was being published in 3 months. That's incredible, Mom, Marcus said. Do you really want the story out there, though? People will know what happened. People should know, I said. There are thousands of women my age who are being taken advantage of by family members, who are being isolated and manipulated and financially abused. If my story helps even one person recognize what's happening and protect themselves, it's worth the embarrassment. The book came out the following spring. It didn't become a bestseller or anything dramatic, but it sold steadily. I started getting emails from readers, mostly women, sharing their own stories. Some had daughters-in-law like Christina. Some had sons or husbands or siblings who were draining their resources. Some were just beginning to suspect something was wrong. I answered every email personally, sharing resources, recommending lawyers and investigators and therapists. I became accidentally connected to a community of people who'd experienced similar betrayals. We supported each other, shared strategies, celebrated victories. It gave meaning to everything I'd been through. Now, 7 years after that terrible Thanksgiving, I'm 65 years old. Marcus and Jennifer are talking about having a baby, which would make me a grandmother. Jennifer's kids call me Grandma Carol already, which makes me ridiculously happy. My relationship with Marcus is stronger than it's ever been, built on honest communication instead of assumptions. I still have cameras in my house, but I don't check them compulsively anymore. I still think about Christina sometimes, wonder what she's doing in prison, whether she's actually changed or just learned to be a better liar. But mostly, I think about how I saved my own life by trusting my instincts, by refusing to be dismissed, by building evidence that couldn't be ignored. I think about how many women my age are told they're paranoid or overly sensitive or imagining things when they raise concerns. I think about how we're expected to be nice and accommodating, even when people are actively trying to harm us. And I'm grateful that I was willing to be the crazy old bat, the paranoid mother-in-law, the vindictive ex-family member, whatever people wanted to call me, because being alive and called crazy is infinitely better than being dead and remembered as nice. If you're watching this and something about my story resonates with you, if you're feeling that nagging instinct that something isn't right, I want you to listen to that instinct. Document everything, install cameras if you need to, hire investigado. RS. Talk to lawyers, build your case. Don't wait for someone to believe you. Create evidence that can't be denied. Your life might depend on it. And if people call you paranoid or dramatic or crazy, remember that I was called all those things too, right up until the moment I proved I was right. Trust yourself. Protect yourself. Don't apologize for surviving. Thanks for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your own experiences in the comments. Your voice matters, your story matters, and you deserve to be protected and valued. Stay safe out there, and remember, family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. And if they're tearing you down, you have every right to defend yourself, no matter who they are.